The story lives mostly in the messages, so I'll let them tell most of it, with just enough between each one to keep the timeline straight. Slack, #debris screening, Tuesday, 9:14 a.m. Yusra Delacroix, pulling the morning conjunction report for the Meridian 7 constellation and something's off. Orbit guards showing 41 tracked objects in our screening volume for the next 72 hours. My manual cross-check against the public catalog is showing 42. Yusra Delacroix, not a huge discrepancy on its own, but I want to know which object dropped before I sign off on today's maneuver plan. Yusra had run this exact cross-check every morning for 3 years, a habit that predated OrbitGuard's deployment by almost that entire span, the kind of manual double verification that had become, across her career, less about distrust and more about simple professional muscle memory. Most mornings the numbers matched. This one didn't, and she sat with that discrepancy for a full minute before typing anything else, running through the ordinary explanations first, a decayed object finally dropping out of catalog range, a data refresh timing mismatch, the kind of one-off that resolved itself by the next morning's pull 9 times out of 10. Slack, #debris screening, Tuesday, 9:41 a.m. Marcus Whitfield, ran a diff against yesterday's catalog pull. Object 44192B and 44192C both show up in the raw feed, but OrbitGuard's active screening list only has one entry under 44,192. Marcus Whitfield, looks like a merge. Same catalog family number, different letter suffix, same-ish orbital plane. System might be treating them as duplicate observations of a single object. Yusra Delacroix, they're not duplicates. 44192B and C were 2 separate fragments from the same collision event 18 months ago. Different orbits, different decay rates by now. If OrbitGuard merged them into one track solution, we've got a real object that thinks it's watching that it's actually not watching at all. Marcus had joined the debris screening team only 8 months earlier, sharp but still building the specific pattern recognition that came from years of watching how these systems tended to fail in practice rather than in theory, and Yusra could tell from the pause before his next message that he was running the implications forward himself, considerably faster than she'd expected from someone that knew to the work. Marcus Whitfield, if it's dropping one fragment from active screening entirely, that's not a display bug. That's a real gap in collision coverage. Yusra Delacroix, that's exactly what I'm worried about. I'm escalating this to data systems right now. Email, Tuesday, 10:02 a.m. from Yusra Delacroix to Camille Delacroix. Subject, possible deduct bug in OrbitGuard, need eyes today. Camille. Found what looks like a database deduplication error affecting object 44192B/C, the 2 fragments from the collision debris field we've been tracking since last year. OrbitGuard's active screening appears to be treating them as a single object rather than 2, which means one of them has effectively dropped out of collision screening entirely while the system believes it's still being monitored under the merged entry. I don't yet know which of the 2 fragments is the one that's actually missing from screening. I need someone from your data systems team to pull the merge logic today, not next week, because if this is a systematic issue rather than a one-off, we could have other close catalog number objects affected the same way across the full constellation. I know today's already full for you. I'm asking anyway, because I don't think this is the kind of thing that gets less urgent by waiting until tomorrow's stand-up to raise it properly. Yusra. Slack, DM, Tuesday, 10:19 a.m. Camille Delacroix, got your email. Pulling the merge logic now. How confident are you this is a real gap and not just a display quirk in your manual cross-check? Yusra Delacroix, confident enough that I want an answer before I sign today's maneuver plan, Camille. If 44192C is the one that dropped, and it's on a trajectory anywhere near Meridian 7's next few orbits, I need to know that before I tell anyone it's safe to hold position. Camille Delacroix, give me 2 hours before you escalate this past our team. I want to actually understand the bug before it turns into a company-wide fire drill over something that might resolve to a formatting error. Yusra Delacroix, I'll give you 2 hours. I'm not signing the maneuver plan until I have an answer either way. Camille Delacroix, understood. 2 hours. Yusra closed her laptop for a moment after that last message, the specific restless quiet of someone who's just agreed to a deadline she isn't entirely comfortable waiting for. 2 hours felt reasonable on paper, the kind of window she'd have granted any other engineer on the team without a second thought, and yet she found herself checking the clock more often than the wait genuinely warranted, aware, somewhere underneath the professional patience, of exactly how much could theoretically be moving through empty space in that same 2 hours without anyone watching for it. Camille ran Solstice Orbital's data systems team, having built OrbitGuard's core screening architecture herself over 4 years, starting not long after Yusra had joined the debris analysis group as a junior tracker, two half-sisters who'd grown up mostly apart, different mothers, a father who'd split his attention unevenly across two households in ways neither of them had fully processed until well into adulthood, reconnecting properly only after both had independently ended up in the same small, specialized industry. Yusra still remembered the specific strangeness of that first professional reunion, 4 years earlier, both of them walking into the same industry conference and recognizing each other across a crowded exhibit hall before either had any idea the other worked anywhere near orbital debris tracking, a coincidence so specific it had taken both of them a full minute of stunned small talk to actually believe. Their father had never been especially good at keeping either half of his life informed about the other, and Yusra had spent most of her 20s assuming Camille had drifted into something entirely unrelated, finance maybe, or software somewhere far from anything involving satellites. Finding out otherwise, in that exhibit hall, had felt like discovering a considerably larger coincidence than either of them had any right to expect from two people who'd spent a combined maybe 40 days together across their entire childhoods. Their professional relationship had always run cleaner than their personal one, a fact Yusra had noticed more than once without ever quite deciding what to do with it. They worked well together, communicated clearly, trusted each other's technical judgment more readily than either of them extended that same trust to most colleagues, and yet the two of them had never quite managed the kind of easy, unguarded closeness Yusra sometimes watched other siblings share, something that always felt, to her, like it belonged to people who'd actually grown up in the same house rather than two people assembling a relationship backward, as adults, out of professional respect and bi-weekly coffee. Internal Engineering Log, OrbitGuard Merge Diagnostics, Tuesday, 11:47 a.m. Root cause identified. Catalog ingestion pipeline assigns internal tracking keys based on primary NORAD catalog number, with fragment suffix, A, B, C, etc., appended as a secondary field rather than incorporated into the primary key itself. A schema update pushed 11 days ago, intended to improve ingestion speed for high-volume catalog updates, inadvertently changed the deduplication check to compare primary catalog numbers only, dropping the secondary suffix field from the uniqueness comparison. Objects 44192B and 44192C, sharing the same primary catalog number, were merged into a single tracking entry as a direct result. Object 44192C's more recent tracking observations were discarded during the merge in favor of 44192B's older, more complete dataset, meaning the system's active orbital solution reflects only 44192B's trajectory. 44192C has not been actively screened against any Solstice constellation asset since the schema update 11 days ago. The engineer who wrote that log entry, a careful, methodical man named Prayash who'd caught the actual root cause faster than even Camille had expected, later told her he'd found it almost by accident, pulling the schema change history purely out of habit rather than any specific suspicion, and recognizing the altered comparison logic within about 90 seconds of actually looking at it directly. 11 days is a long time to sit with a gap like that quietly widening in the background, and Camille read that specific number in the log entry 3 separate times before she picked up her phone to call Yusra directly rather than continuing over Slack. Slack, DM, Tuesday, 1:52 p.m. Camille Delacroix, confirmed. It's 44192, see that dropped. 11 days, not just this morning. I need you to run an emergency screening pass against the full constellation for that specific object right now, before we do anything else. Yusra Delacroix, running it now. Yusra Delacroix, Camille. Meridian, 7. Conjunction probability with 44192, C peaks at 6:40 p.m. tonight. That's less than 5 hours from now. Camille Delacroix, how close? Yusra Delacroix, inside our maneuver threshold. I'm recommending an avoidance burn immediately, and I need mission ops looped in within the next 10 minutes, not after a full incident review, Camille. We can do the review tonight. We need the burn approved first. Camille Delacroix, agreed. Loop them in now, I'll join the call as soon as I can. The 5 minutes between that last message and Yusra actually opening the mission ops channel felt considerably longer than 5 minutes. The specific compressed urgency of watching a number on a screen represents something genuinely consequential rather than an abstract exercise. 6 hours of calm morning routine collapsing, all at once, into a single afternoon where every remaining minute suddenly mattered. Slack, #MissionOpsUrgent, Tuesday, 2:04 p.m. Yusra Delacroix, flagging an emergency conjunction event for Meridian, 7. Object 44192-C, previously dropped from active screening due to a data pipeline error, shows a collision probability above our maneuver threshold at 6:40 p.m. tonight. Requesting immediate review and avoidance burn approval. Full technical write-up to follow, but the maneuver decision can't wait on that write-up. Diego Marchetti, Mission Ops Lead, pulling up the numbers now. This is showing up on OrbitGuard's dashboard as clean, Yusra. Nothing flagged. Yusra Delacroix, OrbitGuard's dashboard is wrong because it merged 2 separate debris fragments into one tracking entry 11 days ago and dropped the more current data for one of them. I'm not asking you to trust the dashboard right now. I'm asking you to trust the emergency rescreening pass we just ran manually against the raw catalog data, which is showing this conjunction clearly. Diego Marchetti, send me the raw screening output directly, not through the dashboard. Yusra Delacroix, sent. Diego had run mission ops for Solstice Orbital's constellation for nearly a decade, longer than either Yusra or Camille had worked at the company, and Yusra had learned, across her 3 years reporting into his approval chain for maneuver decisions, that he asked exactly the right amount of skeptical questions before committing fuel to an avoidance burn, never too few, never so many that a genuine emergency got lost in unnecessary process. She watched his response timestamp with something close to held breath, the particular anxious patience of having done everything within her power and now needing someone else's judgment to finish the job. Diego Marchetti, confirmed independently. Approving the burn. How much runway do we have? Yusra Delacroix, about 4.5 hours. Enough time to do this carefully. Not enough time to spend any more of it arguing about which system to trust. Diego Marchetti, understood. Pulling the maneuver team together now. Good catch, Yusra, seriously. Slack, #debris screening, Tuesday, 2:31 p.m. Marcus Whitfield, just saw the mission ops thread. Is this actually happening right now? Yusra Delacroix, it's happening. Burn scheduled for 5:15. I need you to run the same merge check against every other active constellation we screened for, not just Meridian, 7. If this bug's been live for 11 days, I don't want to assume it only ever mattered for one satellite family. Marcus Whitfield, on it. Want me to loop in the other client teams too, or hold that until we've confirmed scope? Yusra Delacroix, hold client communication until Camille's team confirms full scope. I don't want anyone outside Solstice hearing a partial version of this before we actually understand it ourselves. Marcus ran the cross-constellation check within the hour, coming back with the same clean result Camille's team would later confirm formally, no other active conjunction risks tied to the merge bug, though the process of actually confirming that took considerably longer than the check itself. 3 separate engineers independently verifying the same negative result before anyone felt comfortable calling the immediate danger fully contained. Yusra spent that hour split between monitoring the maneuver preparation and fielding a steady stream of internal questions from people up the chain who'd heard fragments of the afternoon's events and wanted direct answers rather than second-hand summaries. Slack, DM, Tuesday, 3:47 p.m. Camille Delacroix, full scope check complete on our end too. Nothing else active. I know Marcus already ran his own version, wanted you to have ours independently rather than just trusting his. Yusra Delacroix, good. 2 independent confirmations is exactly what I want on record before this burn executes. Camille Delacroix, how are you doing? I know today's been a lot on top of the actual technical work. Yusra Delacroix, ask me again after the burn confirms clean. Right now I'm mostly just watching the clock. Camille Delacroix, fair enough. I'll be watching it too. A brief aside, since it matters to how the rest of this reads. Their father had never been deliberately unkind about splitting his attention between 2 households, as far as either of them had ever been able to piece together as adults, simply overwhelmed in the specific way some parents are, stretched thin enough between 2 lives that neither daughter got quite the consistent presence the other one imagined the other must be getting instead. Yusra grew up assuming Camille had the easier version of him. Camille grew up assuming the same thing in reverse. Neither of them found out how wrong that assumption was until they were well into their 20s, comparing notes over a drink at some cousin's wedding neither particularly wanted to be at, both of them slowly realizing they'd spent childhoods resenting a sibling for an advantage that had never actually existed on either side. That comparison, more than anything either of them has said directly about it, is probably the real reason a 5-hour technical emergency turned into the most honest conversation they've had in years. Some sisters build trust slowly, over decades of shared history. Yusra and Camille built theirs backward, out of 2 careers that happened to collide, and out of exactly the kind of crisis that forces 2 people to find out fast whether the trust they've been assuming is actually there. The avoidance burn executed cleanly at 5:15 p.m., a small, routine adjustment to Meridian 7's orbit that would have been entirely unremarkable if the previous 7 hours hadn't been spent racing to confirm it needed to happen at all. Yusra watched the telemetry confirm the maneuver's completion from her own console, the satellite's new trajectory settling into a track that put it comfortably clear of 44192C's projected path by a margin that felt, in the moment, considerably more precious than the raw numbers on the screen probably deserved. She sat back from her console once the confirmation came through, the specific physical release of tension she hadn't fully registered carrying until it finally let go, hands slightly unsteady in a way she hadn't noticed while she'd actually needed them steady. The control room around her had the particular quiet of a genuine crisis resolving cleanly, a handful of other analysts and engineers who'd gathered near her station over the previous hours now drifting back to their own screens, the ordinary rhythm of an afternoon reasserting itself over what had briefly become the only thing that mattered in the entire building. Slack, DM, Tuesday, 5:23 p.m. Camille Delacroix, burn confirmed clean. I owe you a considerably longer conversation than I have the bandwidth for right now, but I wanted to say it before the day gets away from both of us. You were right to push past my 2-hour ask this morning. Yusra Delacroix, I know you weren't trying to slow walk it, Camille. I know you wanted to actually understand the bug before it became a fire drill. Camille Delacroix, I did want that. I also think, if I'm honest, some part of me didn't want my own architecture to be the thing that almost caused this, and that made me slower to believe it than I should have been for those first 2 hours. I need to sit with that more than I want to right now. Yusra Delacroix, sit with it tomorrow. Tonight I just need the full incident review scheduled and every other close catalog number object across the constellation checked against the same merge bug, because if it happened once from one schema update, I don't trust that it only happened once. Camille Delacroix, already running that check. I'll have results by morning. Internal Incident Review, Excerpt, Thursday. The review identified 6 additional object pairs across the full Solstice catalog affected by the same primary key deduplication error, none carrying an active conjunction risk at the time of discovery, all corrected within the review's first day once the specific pattern was understood. The schema change responsible for the bug was reverted within 18 hours of initial discovery, restoring fragment suffix comparison to the deduplication logic, alongside a new automated cross-check comparing OrbitGuard's active screening count against the raw public catalog count daily, specifically designed to surface exactly the kind of discrepancy Yusra had first caught manually on Tuesday morning, without requiring anyone to notice it by hand going forward. The review meeting itself ran nearly 2 hours, considerably longer than most incident reviews at Solstice, largely because Diego insisted on walking through the full 5-hour timeline minute by minute rather than accepting a summarized version, a level of scrutiny Yusra appreciated even as she found herself, more than once during the meeting, having to recount the specific anxiety of that afternoon in a considerably flatter, more procedural register than it had actually felt living through it. Walk me through the decision to escalate past the 2-hour window Camille originally requested, Diego asked at one point, not accusingly, simply thorough. What made you comfortable overriding that agreement once the emergency screening pass came back? I wasn't overriding an agreement, Diego. Camille and I had agreed on 2 hours, and the emergency screening pass came back inside that window, showing a conjunction risk neither of us had confirmed yet when we made that agreement. The situation changed before the deadline did. I didn't need to override anything, I just needed to act on new information the moment I had it. And if the screening pass had come back clean instead? Then I'd have waited out the 2 hours like we agreed, and we'd be having a considerably less interesting review meeting today. Camille presented that automated cross-check to the full engineering team herself, walking through the incident from the schema change forward without minimizing the 11-day gap or the 4.5-hour window it had ultimately cost the team to close. She didn't mention, in that meeting, the 2 hours she'd initially asked Yusra to wait before escalating, and Yusra noticed the omission without deciding, in the moment, whether it mattered enough to raise. It was a small thing, in the scale of everything else the review covered, and yet Yusra found herself turning it over more than the meeting's actual substantive content in the days that followed, the particular way a technically accurate account could still leave out the one detail that had felt, from the inside of living it, like the most personally significant part of the whole day. Text message, the following Sunday, 11:20 a.m. Camille, coffee later. Not a work thing. Actually not a work thing this time. Yusra, sure. Same place. Camille, same place. I keep thinking about the 2 hours. I want to actually talk about it, not just the incident review version. Yusra, okay. They met at a small coffee shop 3 blocks from the office, the same one they'd been meeting at every other week or so for the past 4 years, a routine so established that the barista greeted them both by name and had their usual orders started before either of them reached the counter. Yusra noticed, sitting down across from Camille that morning, that her sister looked considerably more tired than she had even during the incident review, the specific exhaustion of someone who'd spent several days turning something over privately before finally deciding to say it out loud. Camille, I think I've spent 4 years building something I was quietly more attached to being right than I let myself notice. I didn't slow-walk Tuesday morning because I doubted you specifically. I think I slow-walked it because some part of me needed the bug to be smaller than it turned out to be, and that's a considerably more uncomfortable thing to say out loud than I wanted to verify before escalating. Yusra, I noticed you left that part out of the review presentation. Camille, I know you did. That's part of why I'm bringing it up now instead of letting the clean version stand. Yusra, why did it matter so much to you that it be smaller than it was? Camille didn't answer right away, turning her coffee cup slowly on the table between them, the particular hesitation of someone reaching for an honest answer rather than a comfortable one. Camille, I think because OrbitGuard's the thing I built to prove I belonged in this industry on my own terms, not as somebody's half-sister who happened to end up in the same field by coincidence. For years of building something genuinely good, and the first real crack in it showed up specifically because I designed a comparison check that didn't account for something obvious in hindsight. I wanted 2 hours to find a smaller explanation because the actual explanation felt like it was about me, not just about the system. Yusra, it wasn't about you, Camille. 11 days is a real number. 4.5 hours is a real number. Those numbers don't care whose name is on the architecture. Camille, I know that intellectually. I don't think I fully believed it Tuesday morning. They didn't resolve much more than that over coffee, not in any tidy, quotable way, the conversation drifting eventually into other things, an upcoming maintenance window, their father's upcoming birthday, the ordinary texture of 2 people who genuinely liked each other's company working their way back toward comfortable ground after a harder conversation than either of them had planned on having that morning. Yusra has thought, in the months since, about how strange it is that the clearest conversation she and Camille have had in years came out of a database merge bug and a 5-hour scramble to fix it, two half-sisters who'd spent most of their adult lives being genuinely good colleagues without ever quite becoming the kind of family who talked plainly about the 2 hours underneath an apology. OrbitGuard's daily cross-check has caught 2 more minor discrepancies since the incident, both resolved within hours, neither remotely close to the stakes of that first Tuesday. Yusra still runs her own manual verification every morning anyway, the same habit she's kept for years now regardless of what any automated system promises to catch on its own, though she notices, checking the numbers each morning, that she's started hoping less for a discrepancy to prove a point and more, simply, that the 2 counts will keep matching, one ordinary morning after another. Marcus asked her once, a few weeks after the incident review had finally closed out, whether she thought the whole thing would have gone differently if she and Camille hadn't been sisters, whether a less personally invested pair of colleagues might have argued past the 2-hour window faster, or slower, or not at all. Yusra thought about it longer than the question probably warranted before answering. I think a lot of colleagues would have escalated past 2 hours the second the screening pass came back showing risk, same as I did. I don't think that part had much to do with us being sisters. I think the part that had to do with us being sisters was what happened after, sitting in a coffee shop being honest about the 2 hours instead of just letting the incident review stand as the whole story. I don't know that most colleagues get to that conversation. I think we only did because we'd already spent years learning how to be honest with each other about smaller things, long before this one actually mattered. She still checks the morning numbers first thing, before coffee, before almost anything else on her calendar, 41 and 42, or whatever the counts happen to be on any given day, waiting the half second it always takes to confirm they match, and finding, more often than not, that they do.